Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to you. So good to see you all here. We're just giving it a moment or two to allow our virtual community to build up. We want to see some good critical mass before we get started. But while we're waiting and we're meeting in some other folks, I would invite you to go to the chat and let us know where you are joining the conversation from today. It is always a special treat for us to see the different geographies that are being represented today. And we hope that you've had a good week so far and that you're ready for the weekend. And while you're sharing into the chat where you're joining the conversation from, feel free to share your LinkedIn information if you desire for this community to be in touch with you and to connect beyond this window of time together today. We always enjoy learning with and from each other, and sometimes the best conversations happen after Intentional Conversations VodCast. And by the way, for any newcomers, I am Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, and I serve as the founder and lead principal consultant for NWC. And I want to give a shout out to the NWC team. They work tirelessly every single day, and they have for almost the past 5 years to bring this virtual learning experience to our broader community so that we all can deepen our understanding and knowledge and empathy as we lean into diversity, equity, and inclusion, justice, accessibility, belonging, all the things, right, that fall under the broad umbrella. Here at NWC, we do value disability inclusion, and so we have closed caption that has been enabled. For those of you who would like to use that to enhance your experience today, we also welcome cameras to be on if you're part of our Zoom community, but they're not required. While we do love to see smiling faces, we know that many of you are here just in an auditory capacity while you're multitasking. And whatever way in which you are joining today's conversation, we are extremely grateful. And we look forward to what I know is going to be really rich dialogue. If something is said today that resonates with you, I want you to be sure to use the chat because the chat is our lifeline. It is our way of extending proximity to each other as we learn with and from each other. If a resource comes to mind that has been very useful for you and you think it would benefit this community, then you know what to do. Share it into the chat. Sharing is caring, and we want to make sure we're leaning into that today. I want to give a special shout out to all of those who are joining us live via LinkedIn. We do have a community of folks that may not be a part of our Zoom community, but they do catch the show week after week by joining us on LinkedIn Live. And I just want you to know that if you are joining by LinkedIn Live, you are very much a part of this community. And so go to the comment section, share your thoughts, share anything that you feel like would be a benefit to this community, because we're bringing all of those conversations over into our Zoom chat to make sure that we are connected as one big happy family. So once again, welcome to Intentional Conversations VodCast. We're so glad you're here. Hope you enjoy the show. Let the conversations begin. Indeed, I had to start that over again because it's such a great video. It really shows how in which we like to show up to these conversations. I was adjusting my camera, so thank you all for your patience there. But once again, I am Dr. Nika White, and this is Intentional Conversations VodCast, where we also extract the audio and we make the show available in a podcast capacity for wherever you like to get your podcast content. One of the things that we love to do here at NWC to kick off our Intentional Conversations VodCast week after week is just to share some national observances so that they are in your hearing and that you are aware of ways in which you can stand in solidarity and support in very intentional ways different communities. And so we're in the month of November, and that means that Native American Heritage Month is still underway. I hope that you will do all of you can to increase your cultural humility and knowledge and understanding to be able to advocate for all the many wonderful ways that the Native American community is contributing to our society. And with that in mind, I also want to make sure that you are aware that we did recognize Transgender Awareness Week that took place November 13th through the 20th. So since we're kind of straddling across 2 different weeks, we did announce this last week. I also wanted to mention it as part of today's conversation as well. Now, if you've been with us for quite some time, you know that there are a number of resources we like to make available to our general community so that you can continue to deepen your knowledge and understanding of all things DEIB. And so today is no different. I want to make sure you are recalling that there are 4 separate LinkedIn learning courses that have been released over the past year or two, where yours truly served as the instructor, and a current course right now, which is entitled Navigating AI Through an Intersectional DEI Lens, is made available to you for free by LinkedIn Learning through December 31st. And so if you've been looking to gain some additional knowledge as to how in which we can make sure we're using AI in a very ethical way, then be sure you take advantage of this opportunity. Now, I'm super excited because January will be the 2-year anniversary of my book, Baby, Inclusion Uncomplicated, a transformative guide to simplify DEI, which was published in partnership with Forbes Books. And in year 2, we are releasing the paperback version of that book. And so I'm really excited. I hope that this will allow an opportunity to reinvigorate maybe some of the momentum that the book had when it first came out. And I want more people to be able to benefit from it. And so the paperback version definitely is going to help us to extend that reach. And so I hope that you will share this opportunity out and help me to promote it in January. The exact date is January the 6th. So keep looking out for that. Now, speaking of LinkedIn Learning, there's another course that is my latest course, and it's called Addressing Hate Speech in the Workplace. It is available now, and I am telling you, so many different organizations are looking for ways to upskill their staff, their leaders, their managers around how do we have these difficult conversations right now when there's so much anxiety and so much division that's happening, especially now that we're in post-election and the results are out. But this is a way for us to understand the difference between free speech and hate speech and to try to navigate with civility as we are kind of holding the space for difference while at the same time trying to make sure that we're educating ourselves and we're being open-minded to, again, try to create a society where we're really centered on humanity. Now, in 2025, of course, we are going to be bringing back Intentional Conversations VodCast. And right now, we have a few spots that are remaining in the month of March, and then we'll be completely booked for Q1 of 2025. If you know of someone that you think would add value to this community, we invite you to let us know who they are. We would love to be in touch with them and to see about getting them on the show. So you can let us know of your recommendations by contacting my colleague, Amora Carter, and simply you can reach her at amora@nikawhite.com. We'll place that into the chat so that you can capture it if you have recommendations. I want to, in advance, wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. We will not be here for Intentional Conversations on next Friday. We know that many people spend this time observing the holiday with family and friends. And so we want you to be free to do that, but we will return the next week. And when we do return on that next week, we're actually going to be welcoming Yolanda Webb as our Intentional Conversations guest speaker. So mark your calendars for that, December the 6th. Actually, in the month of December, we will only have Intentional Conversations for the first 2 Fridays. We're taking the remainder of the year off because we know that many people will be out and about with family and celebrating in your own way. And this gives us a chance to also just get aligned for what's to come in 2025 relevant to Intentional Conversations. But in that talk on December 6th, Yolanda and I are going to be discussing attention bias, intention versus attention, the election and what happened, and intentional leadership. If you're thinking, we're going to still keep talking about the election, yes, because there's a lot more that we need to unpack with that, and a lot more that we just don't know how it's going to really impact a lot of the work that so many of us care deeply about. So do join us for that conversation with Yolanda Webb on December 6th. Now we get to the point in time where I have the privilege and honor of introducing formally today's guest co-host. For those of you who've been with us, you know that I like to do so by reading the individual's bio. I think it's so important for our community to know the accolades, the credentials, the experiences in which our guest co-hosts show up to the conversation with. And so today I am so honored that Natasha Wade said yes to our invitation. And I'm going to read her bio, and it's quite short today, not because there's not a whole lot of stuff that she needs to be given credit for because she is amazing, but because a lot of her experiences are going to come out basically in our intentional conversation today. Natasha Wade, she's known as your Black woman's soul coach. I love that. She helps Black women achieve their deepest soul desires in life, love, work, and play. She achieves this by providing a safe space for Black women to dream, to build and create whatever life and career they want through coaching support. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that I can bring into the spotlight. I'm going to add her now, Natasha Wade, who is here with us. Yes. Yeah, we've been dancing all morning since we've been connected. That's the first thing we did. We just started dancing. So let me just say, before I release my friend Natasha to greet this audience in her own beautiful way, that I am so excited for today. I need today, as much as probably so many of you who are connected here today, whether LinkedIn Live, whether Zoom, whether you're going to be listening to this later on podcast or catching the replay. I need this. I need this as a Black woman right now. I need this community. I need this sense of validation. And while I know that I am that girl, and many of us Black women know that we are that girl, when we are finding ourselves in times like we are right now, where so much of what's happening has communicated to us that we're not that girl, we need to make sure we're amplifying that message to each other and to ourselves. And so today is very much welcomed. So welcome, Natasha. Now, we do have a tradition here before I release you to greet this audience in your own way. And that tradition is you have to share something with us, my friends, that we would not know from hearing your bio, which we just did, or from looking at your LinkedIn profile. Welcome. How are you?
Fangirling right now.
Oh, you're so silly.
Okay. I'm gonna give you a couple of things. Actually, I'm gonna give you more than what you asked for. I'm gonna give you three things. So
Please.
I am a child of two immigrant parents. My heritage is Trinidad and Tobago. So that's one. I'm Caribbean American. The other thing that I think is important to put out there just to model vulnerability and transparency is I was diagnosed with chronic depressive disorder and anxiety. And I think that's something important to put out there, right?
100.
And in the spirit of rest, playful rest, I just want everybody to know because I saw some people in the chat talking about South Carolina just came from y'all state. Because I went on a Black girl birthday tour where I did a road trip to 6 different cities in the past 2 weeks. And honorable shout out to Joaquina Reed because she is one of the people that I got to see in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Hey, Kina. Shout out to Kina. Love you, Kina. So glad you're here. That is great. So you were in my state. So do
I
I dare ask?
know.
Do I dare ask? Okay, because I remember seeing your pictures on social media. What did you think of my state? What cities did you visit? Share with the community. And what did you think of my state?
Okay. So I am originally born and raised in Houston. So I went from Houston, Texas to New Orleans, Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana to Montgomery, Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama to Atlanta, Georgia to Charlotte, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina to Charleston, South Carolina. And then I drove my way right back on to Houston.
My
And
goodness.
your state is interesting because Charleston wasn't originally on the list. I was supposed to end in Myrtle. But when I
Okay.
went to Montgomery, Alabama, and saw that Charleston was essentially like the biggest recipient of enslaved humans, uh,
Yes.
Spirit said, "You take your ass to Charleston, South Carolina." And
Yeah.
I figured they would have a wider assortment of delectable desserts for my birthday. So, and I was right. I was right. And so, but here's what I will say that was striking about Charleston, South Carolina is that when you listen to, because I did a Black owned tour. I went
Mhm.
with two Black tour guides. And what I thought was striking about those tours is that they both pointed out very they pointed out a couple of relics that seem pretty uh inconspicuous, is that the word? Or just subtle things that look
Mhm.
like benches. However, or just like random blocks, concrete blocks.
Mhm.
But when you talk to them, they would say, that was a slave auction block, right? And just to hear that psychologically, to hear
Yeah.
that, there are Black Americans walking around their city having to deal with the haunting of slavery right in front of literally like concrete, tangible relics of slavery within their cities. It just made me think. It made me think about my own city. It made me think about like what are the different sort of hidden relics that I'm walking around that are memories of enslavement.
Yeah.
So it was just so powerful. It was so powerful.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And what a great experience. Did you travel alone? I'm always intrigued when people travel alone, especially on something
Yes,
that's like
I did.
multi-city. That is
Yes, I did.
fantastic. That is
Yes.
fantastic. So good for you. So when you talk about Charleston, I'm glad that you added Charleston because Charleston does
Mhm.
have significant and very, very rich history as it relates to not only just the country, but of course South Carolina as a state. Did you get to visit Mother Emanuel, the church?
I
Or the
believe I
Emmanuel
did.
9? Did you? Okay, yeah,
I believe I did.
it's quite yeah, it's the place where the 9 individuals were shot and killed,
Yes, I did go
and
there.
okay,
I did
yes,
go
Mother
there.
Emanuel Church is definitely, a spot that, many people will visit, and then Charleston also is the home of the International African American Museum, and my friend, Dr. Tanya Matthews, actually runs that, curated the whole experience, and she has done a phenomenal job. Did you get a chance to visit the museum?
I did. So now that was the other reason I went there.
Yes.
And here's what I will tell you. If anybody decides to do this trip or like sort of reenact this trip, is that Montgomery, their legacy sites are super heavy to me,
Oh,
to me,
yes. Yes,
to
they
me.
are.
To me,
Yeah.
when I went to Montgomery, Alabama, I went through a fourth of it, and I remember even because Joaquina, she was like pretty much my virtual road dog throughout the entire trip. And I remember her, she and I even laughed, chuckled a little bit at it. She was like, "Are you sure you want to go see that whole thing in one day, whatever?" Like she just seemed concerned. And I was gonna be fine. Like I've been to so many different African
Yeah.
American cultural centers and museums. And I went there, Nika, a fourth of the way. I was like, I need to get the fuck out of here. And I actually texted one of my friends and said, I need to get the fuck out of here. It's too much. It's too much.
Yeah, it's heavy. It is. It is. So I did a pilgrimage with the Faith and Politics Institute, and it was in all the places of Alabama. We did, the Selma, we did, of course, Montgomery, and there was a lot of heavy moments there too. And it's interesting that we're having this conversation today because my guest co-host, I think was it last week or the week before, not it was the week before, but she talked about how for the first time she had visited the African American Museum in DC, the big one that's
Mm,
multi-layered, all the floors. And she said that when she entered the bottom floor, because that's where they start, it's like a build, right? She said it was so heavy that she really couldn't continue to the rest of the floors. And I felt that. But what I also reminded her and others of is that it does build. So while if you go and you experience just the bottom floor, if you don't
mhm,
allow yourself to appreciate that we have to start there, but then it does build. We as a people, as Black people, we have come to
mhm.
understand how to navigate and hold both trauma and joy, right?
Ooh,
Right, wrong, or indifferent. We know that. But what I
mm,
love about the African American Museum in DC is that while the bottom floor is heavy, as you just continue to stay with it, and by the way, you could go several times and still not see everything. But if you
that's
can
it.
continue, you then get to those floors where it's just so much joy and pride that it almost like it rewards you for what you had to endure when you were on the bottom floor. And so,
Mhm.
anyway, I just wanted to share that because I don't want people who may hear that feel like I don't have an appetite for that and then miss some of the other beautiful moments. And, it's just educational in general. But yeah, protect your peace, protect your space. We all know what kind of emotional capacity we have. And so,
Well, and I
okay.
wanted to bring that up because to bring it back to the point, like me personally, if you want to go from heavy to light, Montgomery was the place to go for heavy first, but South Carolina was there to go for light. I mean, the way that they curated it, the way that they arranged it, like as soon as you walk in the door,
Um,
it's just like beats and bands and like it's upbeat and it's like it's optimistic. it's imaginative. It's looking back, but
Mm.
it's also like sort of feeling like futuristic. So it gave me, it's almost like it kind of like restored my soul a little bit from
Ooh,
Montgomery.
I
You know
love
what I'm
that.
saying?
Yeah.
So if I were to suggest anybody go to Montgomery first, Lord, do that for 3 or 4 days, stay there 3 or 4 days, don't try to do it in a day, and then go to Charleston, South Carolina.
Awesome. You heard it here first. We're giving you a sequence of how to do this and do it
Mhm.
well. Okay, so let's jump in because there's so much that I want to dig into related to the work that you have attached yourself with so beautifully and so committedly. Let me say that there is
Thank
no
you.
question about where you stand as it relates to your feelings for Black women. I just want to say that because that's really critical. So I mentioned in your bio that you are known as your Black woman's soul coach. And I said, I love it. I love it. I love it. Now I want us to understand a bit more about what does it mean for you and what inspired you to be on that journey and to continue to commit to it to this day?
Oh, yeah. So, what I hear in your question is probably two implicit questions. One is what's the origin story? And the
Yes.
other is why Black women? And spoiler alert, y'all are my faves. That let's just start there, right? Y'all are my faves on the planet. So the origin story, the beginning is like nobody can dispute that I think 2020 was the year of restlessness and rebirth for us all, right? It was the murder of George Floyd, it was the murder of Breonna Taylor. Um, sacred side note is that Natasha Wade, your Black woman soul coach, is pretty much also a remembrance and an homage to Breonna Taylor because I distinctly remember in that year feeling pissed because of I think just the air of injustice and mockery that was surrounding her murder, like the memification of Breonna Taylor. I wrote like a whole blog post around it and that's there. So I'll go ahead and put that aside. But the I was also going through my own personal journey, right? Because I had started I had launched or went on this journey of entrepreneurship a few years back in 2012 and I found myself putting that on the shelf because bills. Like, I don't know about y'all, the 16 people in here, but I'm addicted to the lights being on. I like food in my fridge, I like the gas running and stuff. And the bills were getting high and my savings account was getting low. But in the process of me putting my dreams on the shelf, I felt like I was dying inside. I felt like I was
Mhm.
spiritually withering, right? And I got
Mhm.
to a place where I felt like I was losing myself because I kept working and working and
Mhm.
toiling for somebody else's prosperity and I was losing my purpose. And so, I'm the type of person for somebody who doesn't know me, I'm the type of person like where I'm like, I want to do it myself. I want to do it all by myself. Let me do it all by myself. I'm going to do it by myself. I'm going to do it by myself. I'm going to
Yep.
do it by myself until at some point I have to stop that chant and take off my
Yeah.
cape and say, I
Yeah.
need
I
help.
can't do it by myself.
I
Yeah.
can't do it by myself. I need help. And so I started scouring the internet for my own life and business coach. And lo and behold, God and the universe delivered me Amina Altai. I came across Amina Altai. I read her copy on her website and everything. I had my first free consultation with her and I knew that I was in love with her. We talk about soulmates and stuff when it comes to like romantic love. Let me tell
Yeah.
you something. When you fall in love with your coach, baby, that's a whole other love that you can't even describe. And so it didn't take long for me to invest my good hard-earned $5,000 and invest it in Amanal Tai and myself and say, I need this. And so what she did was she provided this sacred, brave space for me to name my fears, name my shame of feeling like a failed entrepreneur, name and frankly to stake a claim in my calling, to name my calling. And so when I named my calling, I said, Amina, there's just something in me like if resources are never an issue, I just want to center on Black women. I want to work with Black women. And
Mm.
she said, well, what's stopping you? I said, I guess nothing. So I said, okay, and that's what I did. I just decided right then that I was going to make Black women the center of my world and my universe, and I've
Mhm.
been reaping the rewards ever since.
Mm.
Now
I
that's the
love that for
origin
you.
story.
No, I love that for you, and shout out to, is it Amina that I heard you, am I
Amina
pronouncing that correctly?
Al-Sai.
I wanna shout her out. I'm not familiar with Amina, but I wanna shout you out, because when someone can have that type of impact on another person, that changes the trajectory of them living in purpose, I think that's just beautiful. So definitely wanna shout out. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. What does it mean to create a safe space for Black women to dream, build, and thrive?
Yeah. And in that, let me go ahead and answer the second part of the question that you asked me, why Black women, right?
Yes, why Black women?
Why Black women? Because people ask me that all the time. They're like, Tasha, why you always just focusing on Black women? Why you can't focus on all of us? Why you can't focus on all the marginalized people and all the Black people? Listen, going back to Joaquina Reed, and this is something that I hear her say in my head all the time. She says that, your activism and advocacy should be rooted in your lived experience and identity. Clearly,
Mhm.
I'm a Black woman, right?
Yep.
I have been raised by a beautiful, strong immigrant Black woman. I've been nurtured by a village of Black women. I have been surrounded by amazing, transformative, extraordinary Black women, friends, right? I credit them for raising me as well. It's what I know. I know their stories. That is what it is. Let's just start there. Number two, um, Black women are generative. We're creators, right? Like, we're the fastest growing demographic when it comes to
Right.
entrepreneurship. When it comes to
Mhm.
education or being degreed, we amongst the African American or Black community, we are the most degreed in bachelor's, master's, doctorate, that type of thing, right?
Facts. Yeah.
Politically, we show up, duh, last election, right?
Mhm.
Um, we are the torchbearers. Like, we do all these things, and yet in the world, we are largely unseen, unappreciated, denigrated. We have the highest rates of microaggressions in the workplace. When it comes to C-suite positions, we're about 7% of the population, but only about 1% of the C-suite positions, right? We are constantly suffering from prove it again theory. We're always having to prove ourselves and da 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 da, right? There's so much potential there. There's so many
Yeah.
ways that we can be fed into. And so for me, I always say I've never lost investing in Black women. It's
Mm,
just,
mm.
you know what I'm saying? If it's even if I could go back to the 90s and invest in Amazon versus Black women, I'll choose Black women every single damn time.
Yeah. Yeah. Facts. All of that was factual, by the way. This is not just somebody's anecdotal information. This is factual. This are facts that are
Yes.
being shared here today.
Yeah. And let me
Yes.
and let me just go on and say you asked a question around, like, what does it mean to um create a safe space for Black
Yeah.
women? And I think every time I think about that, I think about the superwoman schema, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
going to read this, and y'all just I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm going to have notes because my brain can't handle all these facts. So, um, when I talk about the superwoman schema, if you're not familiar with it, it's just sort of like a concept that has been written about ad nauseum by brilliant Black women like Dr. Cheryl Woods Giscombe. And I'm going to read this off to you. And if this resonates with you, I want you to put a thumbs up in the chat or put some sort of emoji that says, yes, this makes sense. So it says that the superwoman role involves perceived obligations to number one, project strength. Number two, suppress emotions. Number three, resist feelings of vulnerability and dependence. Number four, succeed despite limited resources. And number five, prioritize caregiving over self-care. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Every time when I think about those five of the superwomen schema, I see that in all my clients. I see that in my mentees. I see that in my colleagues. I see that in my friends. I see that in my aunts. I see that in my elders. I see that I see that in myself. I see that in my mother who died, who literally worked herself into a grave. And so when I think about this work, I think about her and I think about how can I metaphorically create the softest mattress ever created on the planet for Black women, where they can simply fall back and have a soft place to land, even though the world is so hard on them, right? Because in this world, when it comes to Black women, we are not allowed to be anything other than perfect. We're not allowed to be vulnerable. We're not allowed to make mistakes. We're not allowed to fall. We're not allowed to fumble. So Natasha Wade, your Black Woman Soul Coach, is where you are invited to be your most hottest ass mess self. Because I celebrate hot ass messes. I'm intuitively a hot ass mess. I celebrate the hot ass mess in me recognizes the hot ass mess in you.
Thank you so much for that. So all of the thumbs up, all of the, the emojis that are being shared, I would imagine that probably so many of us that are connected here today could identify with almost every single one of those. I know I could for sure. So thank you for making that plain.
Mhm.
And there is nothing, let me say this with great level of amplification. There is nothing at all wrong with centering Black women in the way that you do, Natasha. I think sometimes we are made to feel bad for choosing who we really want to support in very intentional ways. And to your point, when we have those lived experiences for ourselves, it's hard for us to not separate a prioritization of the group that we can identify so much with. And so I appreciate you walking very steadfastly in who you want to serve. And I think that's really critical. Okay, so I want to talk about the part of your title of your Black woman soul coach, the way in which you help your clients to achieve their deepest soul desires. How do you do that? How do you help them to uncover it, and then how do you help them to achieve it?
That's a really great question. So I would say traditionally I've done it through one-on-one coaching. I love that intimacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually like what we'll do, and this was also partially inspired by my time with Amina, but like, like part of my one-on-one experience is that we would have like a half day of just kind of like exploring and celebrating and censoring and things like that. And then we go through a series of one-on-one coaching sessions that focus on whatever was identified in that first kind of retreat.
Ah,
But my approach is always to address and kind of serve the whole Black women, right? Because
yeah,
even though I specialize in career coaching, like that's never happening in a vacuum. If you're um, if you're in a toxic work environment, if you're being bullied, you're going to take that back home.
of
And it's
course.
going to impact your
Yeah.
family, it's going to impact your marriage, it's going to impact your health, and vice versa. If you're in a toxic relationship with that dude over there that just runs you ragged, it's going to be at work, right? And if you're spiritually kind of like decentered, or if you're just not taking care of yourself, all of these things work together as a system. So I tend to focus on like 7 different areas: love, growth, play, health, wealth, purpose, and giving, right? Those are the 7 things that I tend to address when I'm coaching. Now, here's what I will say: I will say that I am taking a little bit of a break from the individual part of it because, one, um, I think I have grown a deep appreciation for communal healing. And I
Oh,
love
yeah.
the magic that happens when you bring brilliant, beautiful Black women together and we can just like ricochet and vibe off of each other, right? So, right now, I'm in the process of building and completing a group coaching experience
Mm-hmm.
where there's about 6 different modules. We talk about establishing your purpose. We talk about establishing your values. We talk about establishing your brand, about creating your story, about workplace relationships, right? Which is a huge
Yeah.
one. Like the not only
Mm-hmm.
just the difficult relationships, but like the relationships that should be able to sustain you, right? And being able to do all of that together. And my vision is to be able to still take those same Black women, place us in maybe in a virtual community on LinkedIn or something like that, so that once Nika finishes the experience, if Nika is looking for a little bit of support, encouragement, or frankly, a new job, Nika knows where to go.
They'll have those connections. Yep.
Now, those
I love
connections.
that.
So that is the approach. That'll be the approach in 2025. In full transparency, I've never done it before, but I've never been more excited in my life.
Well, I think that I'm excited for you, and I think that the timing is perfect because there are a lot of brands that are putting out kind of the trends for 2025. And one of the trends, I think it was from Gardner as well as from Korn Ferry, it mentioned that cohort-based learning is on the rise because it is perceived through proof points, evidence-based proof points, that it is very effective for all the reasons you mentioned, that communal aspect, the aspect of feeling some sense of I'm not alone, right? While I'm on this journey, I feel seen and I belong here. I am protected, especially when you have a group that are aligned around very specific identities and demographics. And so I love all of that. In fact, it's something that we're focused on for 2025 as well, is creating those opportunities. I have a number of clients that have really wanted to catapult their DEI efforts to the next level by saying, we have historically just taken all of our employees through, universal training, but we realize that the needs of like our women of color, of like Black women, Latino women, Asian American women are vastly different. And so we need to make sure that we're creating these cohorts to really deepen that level of support and learning. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the challenges that Black women often face in their careers. I love that you think about the whole woman. You mentioned all those different areas, but one of which was work relationships, because that is, we spend a lot of time at work. And so it's
Mhm.
undeniable that we need to be able to have to be empowered around what we can do within our own faculties, our own agency, to be able to help protect ourselves to navigate the complexity of those work environments. Now, that does not, I have to say this, Natasha, that does not negate the importance of the organization at the systemic level also doing their part to make sure that while women are maybe being empowered, that they're not just closing their eyes to some of the systemic issues that are happening within these organizations. Well, what are maybe those top challenges that you often hear from all the coaching work that you do with Black women?
Um, Intuitively, here's what I'll say. Um, Speaking up is a big one.
Yeah.
Because I think with Black women, because we're so afraid of the angry Black women trope and we just simply don't want that
Hmm.
label, we're
Yeah.
always thinking very meticulously about how, I mean, I just had this conversation, frankly, with a potential client yesterday around all this work that I am taking up. Because let's just be honest, y'all, sometimes we are not getting paid the way we supposed to be getting paid for some of these jobs. We're supposed to have a 40-hour per week job and we're doing 60-hour per week work and nobody's paying us for it. And so being able to push back and say, okay, I'm going to act my wage. Leader, I would like to get some parameters around what are these priorities, right? What are some, and I'm going to say no to some of these
Yeah.
things that you're putting on my plate, right? But being able to do that and being able to navigate that, and being able to balance between being assertive, and frankly, um, I don't want to say coddling, but being able to express yourself in a way that's assertive without being career limiting, right? And I think ultimately that's the fine line that Black women are constantly kind of navigating because again, bills, right? Like at the end of the day, like
Right.
we can't take away the fact that at the end of the day, we are living in a very capitalist society where we still got to pay bills, we still got to make money, we still got to pay our kids tuition. And it's a
Right.
very real concern for Black women that they do not want to lose their job. So how do they assert themselves without jeopardizing their living?
Yeah. So a lot of that is really about self advocacy, right? Feeling
Mhm.
empowered to speak up for self in a way that is effective, but also does not create risk to a point where people may lose their jobs. I mean, because again, that is a real concern. That's also about establishing boundaries and how do we communicate those boundaries in a way where people won't see that this boundary is doing something to them, but it's more so doing something for you yourself, right? I say to
Yes.
people all the time, I'm not doing this to you, I'm doing this for me. And there's a difference. And so I love that your coaching gets really granular in those types of practical nuanced approaches and strategies that women can put into their toolbox, because we all need that.
Oh,
So and
and
just
let me just say this one also,
yeah.
this other thing. The other way that I coach Black women is by also reminding them when to step the hell away from the table, right? That's
Oh,
not
yeah, that's a
serving
good
them.
point. Yeah. Yeah,
Because
because it can't be
sometimes we
about just
will
how do we tolerate everything. What
mm-mm,
you tolerate will continue. Sometimes you do need to push people to that point of, yeah, how do you step away? No.
no, if you're
Yeah.
being abused, I'm usually one of the first people to say, "Look, if you have other options, you need to get the hell up out of there because your health, your mental health, your physical health is
Right.
way more important than whatever paycheck you're getting."
Yeah, that part. What we don't talk about enough is how not leaning into radical self-care can lead us to these stress-related illnesses that definitely can take us out, literally take us out. And so it becomes an imperative that we are providing the coaching and the advice to those women who may not, on their own agency, feel like they can separate without having someone encouraging them through that. So I think that's critically important. So we're going to be shifting momentarily to take any questions, any comments. If there's some curiosities that are bubbling up for you that you want to socialize around, we want to give you a chance to join the conversation with Natasha and myself. If you're part of our Zoom community, you can do that by using the raise hand feature. That lets me know that I can invite you to unmute yourself and share. And if your camera is on, I will even add you to the spotlight. Or if you just simply want your question to be presented on your behalf, we will take as many of those as we can as time allows for. You can just go to the chat and share it. If you're joining us by LinkedIn Live, we have not forgotten about you. Go to the comment section and join the conversation there by sharing your comments and your question. And we'll bring those over into our Zoom chat so that we can make sure we're addressing all of the contributions that people in this community want to be able to make. So while you're percolating on that, though, I am going to go to the next question.
Mm.
And this is around success stories. One of the things that just fills my heart is when I can hear success stories of how people have been able to positively impact others. And I would imagine that you have so many, but I'm going to maybe challenge you to think about one in particular that just really, really stands out, Natasha. So give us a story of when a client overcame some significant obstacle through your help and your support and how they achieved their goals. Do you have a story that you can share with us?
I certainly do. So I think about my first client, Malia Amos, and in full transparency, she and I sort of start off in the first in an internship together. But when I launched my uh, coaching endeavor, she was my first client. She was one of the first people to invest in
Nice.
me, invest in her first, but invest in me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so currently now she is the director of health equity at Virginia Beach Department of Public Health. But when she came to me, she was grappling with quite a bit, right? Like she was grappling with how to lean into her genius, right? And her calling and
Mm,
her vision. And frankly, how to like really find community and really, and I think honestly, this is something that we're all grappling with today is
yes.
just like, how are we defining community? What does that look like to us? And how do we even defining family? Because family doesn't always necessarily mean blood, right? And so
Right.
reckoning that within herself. And I'm just so proud of Malia. She has come to a place where she is very rooted and grounded in who she is professionally and as a leader, but then also
Yeah.
what community means to her personally. And she was so kind enough to actually supply a recording that you have. And so I would love for us to just hear directly from her.
I would love for us to play it as well. So I'm gonna get back to sharing my screen, and then we're going to hear this testimonial. Okay.
I've learned from you the power and the magic that comes when there are Black women that support and speak affirmative life into one another. The energy that we create. I know we talk about this whole Black girl magic piece, but baby, listen, the way you spoke to the core of me, and gifting, professionalism, skill set, yes, yes, and yes. But the way I was able to be seen with you, I was able to be heard with you, I was able to speak my truth in a way that I don't think I had done yet. I was able to speak that truth, and that truth helped me to shape who I become as a professional. And so now I am in a space where I'm creating everything that I do. I think this will be my last organized job that I will launch uh, a business that I have drafted and dreamed up. That I'm confident that I can do it and I can do it well. I'm confident that I can earn fund finances and build finances for my family. Um, and you and my time with you as my Black Girl Soul Coach changed the game. It literally changed the game. And I'm not just saying that because you're my girl and I love you, but 100% taking that time and investing in myself changed the game for me. And I'm excited for what's next.
There you have it. That was beautiful. I had chill bumps. I don't know about you all, but I had chill bumps actually listening to that. Um, what an amazing feeling it is to have your purpose to be to make meaningful impact for someone else and to, through their words, not our assumptions, but their words, to feel that impact and know that you've made a difference. Um, that is remarkable. That is beautiful. That is walking in your calling, walking in your purpose. And I just want us to allow space to kind of just sit with that for a second and appreciate
Mm.
it, for all that it is worth to the many women that you are standing in support of through sharing of your skills, your talents. And by the way, let's talk about that too, because I don't people to sit back and think, well, I have a heart for Black women. I have a heart for whatever population of people. I can go and I can do this. There's obviously some training. There's obviously some work that you had to put in to get to this point to where you're making an impact like that. And so I want this community to understand, what was that journey of being prepared for such a time as this to do what you do and do it so well? What did that look like for you?
To become a Black woman soul coach, it was multifaceted. I've had international coach federation training under some of the best in
ICF.
Houston. ICF, yep, I've had ICF training in the past. Like I said, with a couple of the best master trained coaches in Houston. I've When I was building my business at first, I made it my business to go into recruiting specifically because I wanted to understand how people were making their decisions. I wanted to understand what were all the drivers behind why they were making their talent decisions. So I was very intentional about that. Um, and then honestly, a lot of this is just intuitive. I've always been that person, that safe space for people where I've been non-judgmental. I've created non-judgmental spaces for people because I understand what it's like to be judged. I understand what it's like
Right.
to, like, I forget like the this sort of brilliant saying around it, but a lot of the time we walk into our purpose because of what we lacked in the beginning, right? And so
Yes.
I
Yeah.
lack, I think, some of a lot of the safety that I'm giving Black women. I lacked a lot of that growing up. And so I was able to turn that pain into my purpose. And so some of that is just frankly just God's training, life's training, right?
Yeah.
So it's been a culmination of formal education and self-driven education and frankly life education that's brought me here. And I'm
Mhm.
still learning, Nika. Like I usually
Mhm.
tell people, I was like, I will be the first to tell you, if you are looking for that Black woman that has an encyclopedic knowledge about everything, please don't look my way. I am a lifelong student. I'm continuing to
Yeah.
learn. I'm continuing to learn from my clients. Malia does not know that when she was kind enough to send that recording to me, she was breathing life into me. She was reminding me of my purpose. She was rerouting me
Yeah.
in my purpose and my calling. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, so I love that some of the output of your coaching is reciprocal in terms of allowing you to also continue to heal and to grow and to feel supported and be very communal with those that you are building those relationships with. I love what you said about sometimes we walk into our purpose based upon our lack, and that resonates so deeply with me. And it's so true. How many times do we hear of like maybe a father or a mother to say, you know what, I show up differently as a parent because I didn't have my mom or I didn't have my dad, and I wanted that to be a different outcome for my child. And I'm just using that as an example, but we are fueled oftentimes by what we feel like we missed out on. And we want that so deeply to be a part of the lives of those that we're touching, that we love, our offspring. And so that makes perfect sense to me. And your background in training, as you mentioned, it's kind of multi-layered, but you've also spent some time, as you shared, in HR, in the direct space of
Mhm.
diversity and inclusion. So you know all of the things in terms of how these systems of oppression will work against us, and how we, especially as women of color, we have to work even harder to try to overcome those systems of oppression when we can. And I'm saying overcome, that's always the goal, but sometimes it's about how do we navigate it because it's not changing, at least anytime soon.
Mhm.
And that becomes really, really important. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat and I think a question has come through. So I want to make sure that I get this question in while we still have time. And thank you for those that maybe are still kind of percolating. So here's the question. This is from someone that's joined us by LinkedIn. For Black women who have been wearing the super cape or are currently trying to take it off, what is the first step should they take to give themselves? Yeah, how do we remove those capes?
Community. I think a lot of the time, again, it all comes back to community. I think we have the experiences that we have. Sometimes we're working in silos and we think that our reality is the reality, and it's not. You know, there's multiple perspectives that we could be exposing ourselves to, that we don't always do because of hyper independence, and that hyper independence comes from a very structural and structurally oppressive place as well. And so I think community, in just finding Black women who love and celebrate you unapologetically and frankly unbridled, right? Like Black women who love your dirty draws. That's who you need to be around. And and frankly, finding mentors and finding sponsors and finding coaches. And even if it's not
Yeah,
me, even if it's not Nika, even if like finding
yeah,
coaches, finding professional help, like never rob yourself of any resource that you can have within the resources you have. So I think it's just like getting away from that I can do it by myself syndrome. No, you can't. Nobody ever has.
mm-mm,
Not even the most powerful white men,
no,
as
mm-mm,
big as that myth is, the most powerful white men have never done it by themselves. And
yeah.
we don't need to either.
Absolutely, absolutely. So giving ourselves permission to not feel like we have to be superhuman is part of like one of the steps to taking that cape off. And so I appreciate that question coming from one of our community members from LinkedIn. And speaking of LinkedIn, you have such a vast way of engaging on LinkedIn. You're out there all the time. I have referred to certain individuals' content as being scroll stoppers because, you know, as you're scrolling, you eventually kind of stop on certain people's posts, and your content is one that I do not like to miss at all. And
Mm.
so you have such a rich following. And when I talk about rich, it's not just about quantity, but it's about how in which they engage with you. And there's always a lot of chatter happening in the comment section of your post. And so talk to me a little bit about why and how LinkedIn became such an essential platform for your work. And by the way, we will share into the chat Natasha's LinkedIn information just in case you aren't already connected there.
Well, before I do that, I see another question in the chat. It says, how do folks who don't identify as Black women help Black women
Mm,
engage in programs like Natasha? Hey, listen, when I launched this Black women's group coaching experience, I will let y'all know what the cost is, and
there you go.
you can sponsor a whole class if you want
That's a
to.
great way to help. Yes, I love that.
Um, and in answering this question about LinkedIn, let me also answer a question that I think we haven't asked yet, but I think is really important. So I'll put it into two and like give you a 2-for-1 special. LinkedIn has like over 1 billion users across the globe, right? Over 200 countries. It's an incredible platform for us not to only just get exposure and elevate our own individual brands, but the thing that has been on the top of my mind, especially since this election, is how do we reimagine this world? How do we reimagine our workspaces? And I can't think of a better space for us to have those critical conversations around not just how do we perpetuate and continue what has already been an oppressive environment for everyone, including white folks, whether they recognize it or not.
So
We
true.
have a unique opportunity to think about what does a liberated workspace look like, right?
Mm,
So I say all that to say that, yes, like just to answer your first question, LinkedIn is a huge platform. On top of all that, it's geared towards professionalism. It's not an Instagram, it's not a TikTok. It is
right.
specifically geared towards a professional environment. And I think what people are craving right now is authenticity, which is why my content like goes so viral, is because I don't give a shit. I will post whatever I feel like. I will cuss whenever I feel like on that platform because I want to be human, right? And I think that is what people are craving in their workplaces. So when I think about a liberated workplace, there have been a couple of examples that have been out there. Like one that I like to always cite is the Sexual Violence Prevention Association and Days Out, which is a ticketing site. And they've done things like they've done away with things um, like dress requirements, like attire
Yeah.
requirements. They've done things like
Yeah.
gotten rid of performance reviews. They've done things like, like just make it super, super inclusive for everyone. And that is what I want for us. I want, if you're going to
Mhm.
spend 40, some of you are working and spending more time with these people at work than your own children,
Your family.
than your
Yeah.
own kids. If you're going to do that, you might as well be happy, Jesus. Can we be happy? Can we
Can we be
build happy
happy?
workplaces for once?
Yeah, yeah. So what you're describing is what you refer to as a liberated workplace. And I think that you're right. There are not enough organizations that are thinking along those lines. So I want to go a little bit deeper into that. Let's just dream for a second while we have these
Yes,
final few moments.
yes.
What are some other characteristics of a liberated workplace? And specifically talk about it as you envision it for Black women.
Mm. One, we are very unapologetic and we are very stern about who we bring into that organization. And I'm talking to people, again, Black women are the fastest growing demographic
Right.
starting businesses. So when I'm talking about this, I'm not just talking about the Fortune 500, I'm talking to you all that are starting these businesses.
Hmm.
Be unapologetic about people that you're bringing into that organization and make sure that you are asking them the hard questions. How are you demonstrating inclusive leadership?
Yeah.
When you are building teams, what are you considering when you compile and when you create those teams, right? Because you want to understand if diversity and inclusion are on their minds before you even plant the seed.
Absolutely.
When it comes to training, how wonderful would it be if people, just part of the structure, part of the leadership code, whatever, is asking people, how best do you work? How best do you learn? Let's go ahead and create a routine that is built around you versus you trying to conform to us, right? How would it be that even when you're not performing and it's not a great fit, that people don't walk you out like a criminal, that they still celebrate the contributions, the amazing
Right.
contributions you've made, and they celebrate you like a human and just recognize that you just weren't a great match, right?
Yeah.
Well, how would
Yeah.
it be if we did stuff like that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I'm totally aligned with what you're saying. I think that right now we're in this society where we want to believe that a one size fits all approach is going to get the job done, and it's not. We're going to have to really get to know our people one by one, their lived experiences, how they like to work, how they like to be communicated with, and then adapt our leadership style in support of that so that they can show up at their best. And um, that to a lot of people looks like something that's dressed in overalls and it looks like work, but at the bottom line, it is work, but it's work worth working for if it means that now we are taking this human-centered approach where every individual can thrive in every environment they find themselves in. So we are almost out of time, my friend, but I'm so appreciative of you being
So
here. I know, I know,
sad.
I know. I want to thank this community for showing up. We hope that you will connect with us the week after next, because again, remember next week, no Intentional Conversations podcast because of the Thanksgiving holiday. But I want to give you, Natasha, the final moments to close us out in whatever way that feels appropriate to you. Maybe there's something that you have a lot of energy for that's coming up, maybe down the road that you haven't had a chance to socialize. I want to give you an opportunity to do that at this time.
I'm going to instead leave this community with a couple of questions that I want us to all pontificate and think about and imagine for this next era to come, because it's going to be a long 4 years, y'all. Um, how much money do you really need? If you go to my LinkedIn page, I posed a question or a post around capitalism, and we could debate Donald Trump, Kamala Harris all day long. The real question is, why is it so damn expensive to live in this country, right? Regardless of political party. So the question is when we build these businesses, how much money do we really need? And we're going to have to reconcile that greedy spirit in us that really wants to, that is really craving these billions that we can't even spend over a lifetime. Number two, choose your cookout, because it's very clear from this election that we are not living in one America. We are living in 4 Americas. And some of the people that are in some of the people, your America, some of the people
Right.
that are in your circle right now are not in your America, and you're not in theirs. So choose your cookout. I will be at an undisclosed cookout, and I will be checking people's IDs at the door. And I suggest you do the same.
I remember seeing your posts on that. That's a great way to end today. So thank you all again. We hope to see you in a couple weeks for another episode of Intentional Conversations VodCast. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great, safe holiday weekend.